Hello, good afternoon. We'll start with our lecture. Last week we talked about words and their meanings. We said a few words about the concept word, you remember. We talked about how words are built. And then in particular we talked about the meaning of words. And today we will continue with this topic of meaning. So we will talk about sentence meaning and utterance meaning. That is, again, we'll talk about meaning from different angles, from different perspectives, with the help of different models. Okay? Always keep this in mind. Our main topics will be propositional meaning, illocutionary meaning, and contextual meaning. We start with propositional meaning. When you read such a sentence, simple sentence, Max eats, or Max eats apples, and the apples are fresh, what can you say about the meaning of such a sentence? Don't try to paraphrase what's written there. Just, how would you characterize the meaning of such a sentence? What is the meaning of such a sentence? Any idea? What would you say? Very intuitive, very innocent count of this. It's a statement, okay. Yes?
Describes an activity?
It describes an activity. And could you be more specific?
Someone eats something?
Who?
Max?
What?
Apples?
Yeah. So, and we'll come back to statement. Very important remark you made, and description, what you said. But first of all, the meaning here of these sentences is about someone doing something with something at a certain point in time, in a certain place. So who, what, when, where, why, all these things. And that is what we call the propositional meaning of a sentence. This specification of who, what, when, how, why, etc. And here we have some very simple examples. Now, if we want to talk about this meaning of a sentence, then we, of course, need to step back from the sentence itself. Okay? We need some special annotation, some special annotation tool, which allows us to represent this meaning. And this is where predicate logic comes in and models come in based on predicate logic and other things. We don't go into these details here, just to give you a slight idea. So Max eats, eat, and Max. So we represent this as a predication about one or several entities or arguments. In the case of Max eats apples, we have two entities, who and what. So it's eat and who and what as arguments. And apples are fresh. Fresh, what is fresh? Apples. And in these cases here, Max eats apples, apples are fresh. We have simple propositions, but we can combine them and put them together to make things more complex. And usually in sentences produced by human beings, things are pretty complex. So in this case, which sentence do we have here? Yeah. So Max eats fresh apples. Fresh apples is kind of embedded in the proposition Max eat Max apples. What kind of apples? You have embedded here fresh apples. Okay? So simple and complex propositions. And they tell you something about what needs to be the case for the sentence to be true. So if you make such a statement, Max eats apples, well, this statement is true if indeed there's someone called Max and this chap happens to eat apples. Understanding such a sentence like Max eats apples, in this sense, means knowing what it makes true. This doesn't mean that you need to know whether the sentence is true or not, but you need to know what you can do in order to find this out. So Max eats fresh apples, and you watch Max over there, and Max is in fact eating a rotten apple, then you would say, no, that's not true. He is not eating a fresh apple. Okay? So understanding the propositional meaning of a sentence means knowing what the world the sentence talks about would have to be like for the sentence to be true. Okay? That is, in this sense, understanding the propositional meaning of a sentence means knowing its truth conditions. So this is how truth comes in this model of sentence meaning, this propositional model of sentence meaning. Okay? And here we can observe something different. We are still dealing with propositional meaning. If you look at these two sentences, Kevin managed to kiss Linda and Kevin didn't manage to kiss Linda. Well, what they both have in common in terms of meaning is that they both, well, somehow presuppose that Kevin tried to kiss Linda. And in fact, if you make a statement like Kevin didn't manage to kiss Linda, you say something about Kevin. Okay? Not just that he didn't manage to kiss Linda, that he didn't kiss her, but you, in an indirect way, you communicate that he actually tried to kiss her. And that can be quite nasty. So you convey this information by way of a presupposition. You don't claim it directly, you don't state it directly, but you state it as a precondition, a presupposition for the proposition you state directly. Okay? So that's what we call presupposition. And a presupposition in this semantic sense, in your pragmatic classes, you will then later learn that things can be more difficult again. And we need to take a more pragmatic approach, but let's stick to this. For these semantic presuppositions, we have constancy under negation as a kind of test. So if you want to find out whether something is indeed a presupposition or not, then you just need to transform the sentence into its negation, and if this proposition holds, then it's a presupposition. Okay? So here you have something from real life. Okay, Mr. Smith, how fast were you driving when you ran the red light? What is the presupposition? What's the presupposition? Yes? Not just that he was driving fast. What's the presupposition? You want to try it again?
That he ran the red light.
Yeah, that he ran the red light. And this could have been very slowly. Usually it's fast. Yeah? And that is indeed an inference. Okay? We'll come to these inferences later. So it can be a very effective, sometimes nasty strategy people use in communication for conveying something about people in an indirect way. You find this in discussions between politicians during election time. You find it in certain, newspapers. And we are still dealing with presupposition. So first we have looked at simple and complex propositions to better understand what this concept refers to. We talked about presupposed propositions, presuppositions. And now we want to take a closer look at the internal structure of propositions and about one way of analyzing presuppositions with regard to semantic roles. With regard to semantic roles. We have a verb, and the verb describes the action. Well, and now we have several noun phrases. The boy kicked the ball. The wind blew the ball away. The dog caught the ball with its teeth. How would you characterize the semantic differences between these noun phrases? The boy kicked the ball. What's the difference? How would you characterize the meaning contribution of boy and the meaning contribution of ball, or the ball? What does boy refer to? Yes?
Someone who performs the action.
Yes, that's someone who does something, okay, who performs this action. And the ball, receives the action, is affected by the action, right? What about the wind and the ball, or the wind and the boy? Similar? No? You are shaking your head? No, it was... no, not you. So, you.
I mean, one is rather active and animate.
Okay.
The other one is more, I think, depending on
But in both cases we have,
active performance.
yeah, an agent. The difference is that in the one case we have a human, an animate agent, and in the other case not. But in both cases we have an agent, and in both cases we have the ball, which is affected by the action. What about the dog caught the ball with its teeth. Dog and ball. Similar to what we had before? Yes. Yes. With its teeth? Different, right? How would you characterize it? Oh, that comes from a different model to, yeah, but in terms of semantic roles now. What is it? It's not an agent, it's not, well, the object affected is called a theme, it's not a theme, it's, how would you characterize the semantic contribution of with its teeth? Semantic. Hmm? Yes, something like a tool, an instrument. Yeah, that's it. Okay? So here we have agent, theme, and instrument. Okay? But we have more roles. Look at Mary saw a mouse on the wall. Let's start with the simpler part here. On the wall. What is on the wall? Is it theme? Hmm? No. Location, yeah, so that's fairly transparent. What about Mary? Agent? Agent? Yes? But there's a kind of difference between seeing something and, well, kicking, hunting, chasing, and these kind of activities. So it's actually categorized as the experiencer. So we have experiencer as the entity that has a feeling, a certain perception, or is in a certain state, as different from agent, the entity that performs an action. We have the location where the entity is. We have the source where an entity moves from. So she took the book off the shelf and handed it back to George. That is the goal. Okay? So this is a certain model that helps you talk about semantic roles that are specified within a proposition. Okay? Yes?
She and took the book would be then agent and
she.
She.
Yes.
Agent and then he, the book.
Yes. Okay, and now we come to something different. When we understand sentences, we understand the propositional meaning that is specified. But we understand more than the propositional meaning. Look at these examples here. I name this ship the HMS Flounder. Famous example. You are fired. Well, is there something special about these sentences? When you compare them to George kicked the ball?
Yes, and when they say it, the action already is done.
Yes. And what about truth? In all the other cases, we could say, well, this sentence is either true or false, or the statement. But in this case, we couldn't say that, right? It has nothing to do with truth. It's rather, as you said, when I say I name this ship the HMS Flounder. Well, by this very act, the ship gets this name. Provided
Provided the person has the authority to name a ship.
Yes, yes. Provided I'm the right person, I'm authorized to do this, and also provided I do it in the proper way. So this is what you will later then meet again as felicity conditions. Okay? Because here we are entering the level of the dimension of speech acts. When I produce a sentence, when I utter a sentence, I also make a speech act. I do not only specify a certain proposition with certain presuppositions and semantic roles and all these things, but I make a speech act. In this case, I actually name this ship the HMS Flounder. When I say and am the right person, authorized person to do this, when I say to someone, you are fired, well, this person is fired. Okay. These sentences here are called explicit performative formulas. So the as distinguished from so-called constitutives. In the original discussion by Austin of a speech act theory, and when he introduced this theory, he made this distinction between constitutives and performatives. Performatives, they are used for doing things, and constitutives, they can be true or false. But then in the course of the further development of this theory, it soon became clear that every time we utter a sentence, in addition to specifying the propositional meaning, we also perform a speech act. In this example here, a young boy is talking to a colleague of his father, and Tim, the young boy, says, "It's my birthday today." And this colleague, Mr. Lee, says, "Many happy returns. How old are you?" Tim says, "I'm 5. Now this short sequence here, this short conversation, can be analyzed with regard to the speech acts involved. Making a statement in the first case. The second, Mr. Lee's reply, congratulating and asking for information. How old are you? And Tim then again replies with a statement. And here we have 3 speech act dimensions which were originally distinguished by Austin. Locution, illocution, and perlocution. Locution refers to producing this sentence with meaningful linguistic expressions. In later accounts, researchers said the locution concerns specifying the proposition, among other things. The illocution, that is the act that actually refers to what we called making a statement, congratulating, asking a question, making a request, declaring war, firing someone, making a promise, and all these things. Okay? So the illocution conveys an intended communicative function, which is also called illocutionary force. And many people also call it illocutionary meaning. Yeah? All these terms are used interchangeably. What is important for you to understand is that when you understand a sentence, you need to figure out the propositional meaning of the sentence, who, what, where, when, and so forth. And in addition to that, you need to figure out whether it was communicatively meant, intended as a statement, as a question, as a request, and so forth. And if you cannot work this out, then you have not fully understood the sentence. Okay? So both figuring out the propositional meaning and figuring out the illocutionary function, illocutionary force, illocutionary meaning, have to do with understanding the sentence. And because both have to do with understanding the sentence, I feel it makes a lot of sense to use the terms propositional meaning and illocutionary meaning. Yeah? They both have to do with understanding the sentence. The perlocution refers to creating an effect on the hearer. And this effect might be intended or unintended. This communicative function, the illocutionary force, is always intended. It is part of the message. This doesn't need to be part of the message, but it can. So for instance, if I say to someone, you are fired, well, and this person is utterly destroyed and sad, frustrated. That is the perlocutionary effect. Or if this person burst out for joy because finally he has got rid of a job he didn't like anyways. This would be the perlocutionary effect. And sometimes we say something in order to create a certain perlocutionary effect. So you say something in order to please someone. Okay? Or maybe with negative intentions. And sometimes you don't have these intentions, but the other person understands it this way. Okay? So that's the perlocutionary effect. Locution, illocution, perlocution. These three dimensions make up a speech act. Speech acts can be conveyed, that is, illocutionary meanings, illocutionary forces, can be conveyed in a direct way, like open the window. Well, this is a request or an order, depending on the situation. Let's call it direct request. Open the window. But there are many, many ways in which we can convey a request in an indirect way. What could you say in this case? If you wanted someone to open the window, what could you say?
It's cold in here, I'm freezing.
It's cold in here, I'm freezing. What else? What else? You are freezing, yes. What else? Yes. Pardon? Is there a possibility to get some fresh air in here? Yeah, unfortunately here not, but yeah, right. That's another way of conveying an indirect request. What else? Come on. Think of polite ways. I mean, this is also polite, but in particular with regard to requests, which can be very tricky, and you have to be polite, and you don't say, open the window. Yeah, but now all these three remarks refer to the conditions you are in. It's stuffy in here, it's hot, it's not agreeable. There are other ways, yes?
Would you mind to open
Would you mind, right? So you are referring to whether it's okay for this person, the person's attitudes and feelings. What else?
It would be nice if someone opened the window.
It would be nice. So I would like it. You talk about yourself. What else?
Could you open the window?
Yes. Could you, can you open the window? Okay. And in particular, can you open the window is a very typical case. And when you look at it, what is it in the first place? In the first place, it's a question. Can you open the window? And in many, many situations, well, you could come across this, and it is actually meant and understood as a question. So you need contextual information in order to figure out how a sentence is meant and what the illocutionary function is. So I would like you to open the window. It's cold in here. So these are several ways of making an indirect request. Now let's take a look at the relationship between propositional meaning and illocutionary meaning. Have a look at these sentences. John runs down the street. Does John run down the street? John run down the street. And now the question. In which respects are they different? In which respects are they the same? Same proposition, same illocution, different proposition, different illocution. Yes?
John runs down the street is something like you describe something. John is running down the street. Does John run down the street is a question?
Yes.
And the third one is just like a command or something like that.
A request, right.
Request.
Okay. So you have three illocutionary forces, three illocutionary meanings, a statement or description, a question, and a request. What about the propositional meaning? Same or different? Yes? Same? Why?
Because it's always John who runs down the street.
Yes, yes. So in terms of what a proposition does, namely to specify who does what, when, where, why, etc., these sentences are the same. It's always about John's running down the street. Okay? So in a way you could think of the propositional meaning as a specification of something like an event, and the illocutionary function or illocutionary meaning as a specification on how you should, whether you make a statement about this event, or whether you question whether this event is actually the case, or whether you want someone to do something in the world so that afterwards this event took place. Okay? So same propositional meaning, different illocutionary meanings. Right. So we are on the move from sentence meaning to utterance meaning. Right? We have first talked about propositional meaning, and we have then moved on to illocutionary meaning. And several times I made reference to contextual information. I mean, strictly speaking, you wouldn't be able to understand the most innocent sentence without having access to contextual information. In certain models of linguistics and areas of linguistics and semantics, we abstract from contextual information and look at what is specified with the actual words and syntactic structures, the linguistic means of expression. But when you look at what people do and how they understand sentences, you would have to say, well, the picture is richer, and we need to take into account context. To illustrate this, let's have a look at these two sentences, or three actually. In 1924, Mary Higgins lived in Australia. Well, who? Mary Higgins. Okay. When? 1924. Where? Australia. All this information, this propositional information, is given here with this sentence, with the words and the syntactic structures that are used in this sentence. The same in the second one here, or the last one here. In 1989, Ayako Fujima lived in Africa. Who? Okay. When? Okay. Where? Again. Okay. It's given with the sentence. But what about the first one? Last year I lived on the other side of the globe. Who? But we know a little bit about I. Who is I? Think of a real communicative situation. Who is I? The speaker. Yeah? It's not much, but that's what you know. It's the speaker. And how do you find out more about I? Or under what conditions do you know more about I? Hmm?
Yeah, last year he or she lived on the other side of the globe. The I.
Yeah, okay, but I mean we said I. I is the speaker, refers to the speaker. And under what conditions do you know who I actually is? Under what conditions do you know more than just that I is the speaker?
There are more sentences than just one. Just more given, more information given for me to read.
Mm-hmm. If you think of real communication, now you are on a more abstract level.
If I'm the other person, I'm talking to the I.
Yes. If you are talking to this person, that is, if you are part of the communicative situation, if you have access to the communicative situation, if you have access to the situation in which this sentence was uttered, then you know who I is, because then you know who the speaker is. And the same goes for when? Last year. Well, last year, if you don't have access to the communicative situation, then you, what do you know?
And you know nothing about this, but if you speak to him in person, then you know last year is last year.
But did you say you know nothing? A little bit. What do you know? You know a little bit.
Yeah, it was last year, but
Last year when? Last year in relation to what?
when he said this.
Yes, yes. Yeah? So last year in relation to the year in which this sentence was uttered. But if you have access to the communicative situation, you know when this sentence was uttered. Namely, was it this year, or 2000, or 1998? And then you know that last year is, well, 1999 or 1997. What else? Okay? And the same with on the other side of the globe. If you have access to the communicative situation, you know that it is what the other side of the globe in relation to where the speaker was when he or she uttered this sentence was. Okay? So Australia or here. Right? So understanding, figuring out the time reference and the person speaker reference and the place reference, you need to have access to the situation in which this sentence was uttered. You need contextual information. Okay. So, and with this we move from sentence meaning to utterance meaning. Sentence meaning refers to meaning in relation to what is specified, semantically specified, by the words and phrases and linguistic means of expressions used in this sentence. Utterance meaning is what you are able to understand, taking in contextual information. Okay. So sentence meaning, what is given with the linguistic means of expression, and utterance meaning, what we actually understand, and then we are interested in how this works. Now, these devices which are used in the first sentence here, well, this is called deixis, and a special term which is used in this connection is indexicals or indexical expressions. That is, they point to the situation of utterance, the communicative situation, and so typically we have pronouns, demonstratives, adverbs of time and place, and in this case, and their use and interpretation depends on the location of the speaker and or hearer, on the time of utterance. And if you want to understand all this, you need to have access to this situation. Okay? And here we have different types of deixis: place deixis, time deixis, person deixis. Okay? And this entire process of using contextual information in order to generate utterance meaning is called contextual effects. We create contextual effects. And which go beyond what is explicitly signaled with the help of the linguistic means of expression in the sentence itself. Okay, and here we have more contextual effects. I use this in the opening lecture. Let's go over it briefly. Again, my neighbor is a dragon. How would you characterize this? Or what are the possibilities if you take different possible or not so possible communicative situations into account? Yes?
Versus he's not a very nice person, and also that he's that fantasy animal dragon.
Yeah, so one possibility is not a very nice person, or another interpretation would be sort of a fantasy animal, something like that. Interestingly enough, you said he. Or she, right? So again, something you cannot retrieve just from this sentence. You need contextual information. Okay? The flat was full of bugs. Yes?
Could be either insects or listening devices.
Yes. So insects or listening devices. What do we call this? That words have, we talked about it last week, right? Bug. Yeah, we have a case of ambiguity here, but now we need to be more precise. What is bugs? Bug having several meanings. Do you remember the distinction we made between polysemy and homonymy? Is this a case of homonymy or polysemy? Yes. Polysemy, why? Could you be a little bit more precise? Same word. Remember what we said about word. What's the technical term we would use in linguistics? Lexeme, right. So in that case, we would assume the same lexeme with different meanings. And how would you characterize the relationship between the two meanings of bug? Bug as this insect and bug as a listening device. No, we had polysemy. It's polysemy. But how would we characterize the relationship between these two meanings? They are somehow related, right? Bug as an insect and bug as a listening device. Or would you say they are not related at all? Because in that case, we wouldn't have polysemy. But yes? Pardon? I can't understand you. They both kind of look alike, yeah, so these little tiny things. And do we have a term for this kind of relationship? They are what? Oh, well, yeah, well.
The insect or the viewing device or even the monkey itself, which are running.
Oh, right, yes. Do we have a term for this kind of relationship? What kind of process gets you from bug the insect to bug the listening device? Metaphorization. Yeah. The Mozart is a bargain at the moment. The Mozart, what could that refer to? Depending on the context. CD, book, painting, sheet music. Yeah. Women are exploited by men, they don't care. Here, it's supposed to be funny, and well, where, if at all, is the fun? Huh? Yeah, so they is ambiguous. They can refer either to the women or to men. Clean the window, paint the window. It's really very interesting. We have, when you look up window in a dictionary, you get information about its what we call conceptual meaning, denotational meaning. And of course, the conceptual denotational meaning of window in these two cases is the same. But in this utterance, window is taken to refer to different parts of a window. Yeah? What about clean the window? What does this refer to? What do you clean when you clean the window? Yeah. And what you paint when you paint the window? Frame, not the glass. Some people clean the frame as well when they clean the window. And in other cases, other situations, in kindergarten situations, for instance, paint the window actually refers to painting the glass. Okay, so all this is not given with the words and their meanings, but you have to work it out with the help of contextual information. Okay. He was kept in a gruesome blah 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 for 25 years. You remember that we talked about this, that we said in a gruesome, well, prison or dungeon, And indeed, this is something we can work out, what is missing here in terms of meaning, by, in an intuitive way, analyzing the sentence in context. So he was kept somewhere, so this needs to be a place, and it needs to be a place where you can keep someone. And of course you need to make assumptions about who he refers to, whether he is a man or a little child, a boy, or maybe a dog you would refer to as he. Changes the picture. So it's something where you can keep someone, and not just keep this person, but keep the person for a long, long time, 25 years. So not any place which is suitable for keeping someone is also suitable for keeping someone for 25 years. And now we have something else, 25 years, that rings a bell. We know something about, in our societies, about places where people are kept for such a long time. And this is usually a prison. And gruesome, well, that gives a certain connotation that points you in the direction of dungeon or something like that. Is it still okay, or shall we make a little pause and give some people the opportunity to leave? I mean, I know that it's really sticky in here, and or do you want to carry on? Yeah? Okay, thanks. Okay, so expressions, these words and phrases, they don't refer to anything by themselves, but they are actually used by people, speakers and listeners, to refer. And in this act of these processes of reference assignment, we make use of different kinds of information. We, of course, use what we know about the meaning of the words involved, their denotational meaning, their descriptive meaning, conceptual meaning, okay? But that alone is not sufficient. We also use the co-text, which is the surrounding text, and we use the context, the communicative context. So that's what we applied here in these examples. And we make use of world knowledge. What we know about this world, how things work in this world, what things exist or don't, and what makes sense in this world or doesn't in these things. Okay? And on the basis of all this, we make something like informed guesses about the intended meaning. And this is called inference. We make inferences. We make inferences. Schlüsse in German. Inferenz. Inferences. And when we understand each other in situations like these, or in any situation, the vast bulk of what we manage to convey and to understand is based on inferences. Is based on inferences. And only a small part is sort of actually kind of incorporated in the words and syntactic structures used in the sentence. And it's a big challenge now, of course, for pragmatics. So this is where we have moved on now from semantics to pragmatics. It's a huge challenge for people specializing in this field, researchers specializing in this field, to develop models and theories that help us better understand how this works. That we are able, on the basis of very little that is linguistically specified, how we manage on the basis of this to generate and understand a vast array of inferences. And we do it fast and in an intuitive way, and we are usually just not aware of what we human beings are able to do in this respect. And this is, if you like, Paul Grice's problem. Paul Grice, he's famous for the so-called cooperative principle. So later in pragmatics you will come across this concept. And Paul Grice was actually trying to work out how it is possible to mean from the perspective of the speaker and understand from the perspective of the hearer more than is actually said. Take this simple example. Can you tell me the time? And the reply is, well, the milkman has come. Fairly easy for us to understand, to picture a situation in which this would work. But what is involved here? Can you tell me the time? This is actually meant to convey a lot more. Namely, do you have the ability? Can you? Okay. Do you have the ability to tell me the time? But now we need to be more specific with regard to time. Of the present moment, as standardly indicated on a watch, and if you have, please tell me. Now imagine some other culture where you ask people this question, can you tell me the time? And they maybe wouldn't understand you because they don't have this way of measuring a time. Maybe they would look up to the sky, to the sun or the stars, depending on when this is, and then interpret this in quite a different way and give you different information. So do you have the ability to tell me the time of the present moment as standardly indicated on a watch? And if you have, please tell me. All this is not given explicitly here. What about the reply? Well, the milkman has come. Well, when someone says well, they convey a lot of information already with this little word. Namely, well, no, I don't know the exact time of the present moment, but I can provide information from which you may be able to deduce the approximate time, namely, the milkman has come. And now, of course, you need to know when the milkman usually comes. If you don't know this, then this wouldn't help you. But that is about what is communicated here. Okay? So what is linguistically said and what is communicated is miles apart. And Paul Grice has worked out the cooperative principle to explain how this works. How we manage to move from what is said to what is meant. And this is his definition. Make your conversational contribution such as is required at the stage at which it occurs by the accepted purpose or direction of the talk exchange in which you are engaged. Fairly philosophical style, but I think the meaning is clear. And he formulates 4 supporting maxims, namely quantity, quality, relation, and manner. And quantity refers to making one's contribution as informative as is required, but not more nor less than is required. Quality, do not say that which you believe to be false or for which you lack evidence. Relation, be relevant. Manner, be clear, brief, orderly. Now, there is something about this which can be easily misunderstood. The way Grice phrases this, it almost sounds as if it were something like an ethical principle. Be cooperative, okay? Tell the truth, be relevant. And if you are not, you are a bad guy. So this kind of thing. To a certain extent, this is involved. But what is more important for us who want to understand how communication works, what is more important for us is that Grice claims with this cooperative principle that in communication we assume, we make the assumption, we assume that the other person adheres to this principle and the maxims. And on the basis of this assumption, we work out the intended meaning. We work out what Grice then calls conversational implicatures, that are inferences worked out with the help of this cooperative principle, with the help of the assumption that the other person adheres to the cooperative principle and these maxims. Okay? And this even works in situations where people are not cooperative. So being cooperative in this ethical sense is something different. Not unimportant, not at all, but it's something different. So for instance, make your contribution as informative as is required, but not more nor less. Take the example, Nigel has 4 children. Well, how many children does Nigel have? 4. Well, but don't we know that if Nigel has 8 children, he also has 4 children?
4 more.
Yeah, I mean, but this is not, if he has 8 children, then this is what the speaker should have said. Otherwise, he or she violates this maxim. Yeah, that's it. Or quality. Do not say that which you believe to be false or for which you lack evidence. This doesn't mean that you should only tell the truth. So sometimes you make a statement and you get things wrong. So you believe that something is true, but it's actually wrong. So this is okay. For instance, in a situation where, but if you say something and present it as true, but you have evidence that it is not, then you would violate this maxim. And what do you have in that case? How do we call this act? a lie. Yeah, right, it's a lie. Okay. Well, and be relevant, that you say something and it makes sense, it is relevant within the communicative context and all the other information that is available to the speaker. Okay. Now, it is possible to seemingly violate a maxim, but only then we don't call it violation, but we call it flouting. Seemingly violate, flouting a maxim, and in this way convey an additional conversational implicature. For instance, in this case, if you say something which is not true, obviously not true, like he is made of iron. Superman? No. So what are you talking about? He cannot be made of iron. So the speaker seems to violate this maxim. But you have more information about the speaker, and you assume that the speaker adheres to the cooperative principle, and that he flouts the maxim in order to trigger you off to invest more energy into this interpretation process and to generate a certain conversational implicature, and, well, in this case, to try a metaphorical interpretation. He is made of iron. So what could that mean? Whole range of inferences that come up, that become possible. Okay. Okay, the cooperative principle by Grice developed to explain how we manage to move from what is actually said to what is meant. And the inferences that become possible on the basis of or with the help of the cooperative principle are called conversational implicatures. That's a Gricean term. Okay? And this is another model. It's a kind of follow-up model. Starting from Grice, Sperber and Wilson developed this further, and they came up with what they called relevance theory. And what is important here is the distinction between explicatures and implicatures, and we'll say more about this. Let's have a look at the example first. Did you like the Shakespeare lecture? Well, the thematic development was slow and my neighbor fell asleep. So let's look at the reply. Well, the thematic development was slow and my neighbor fell asleep. Well, you intuitively understand this reply as referring back to, well, the question, and that is to the Shakespeare lecture the question was about. In the reply itself, it says the thematic development. Which thematic development? You need to work this out. Okay? The thematic development was slow and my neighbor fell asleep. Neighbor. My neighbor in the bench. Not my next door neighbor. So we have disambiguation. Fell asleep. Well, did he actually fall asleep and started to snore? Could be. But it could also be meant metaphorically. Okay? And then this innocent word and and fell asleep. What about and? Are there different possibilities? And? Any idea?
Maybe the falling asleep of the neighbor is the result of the slow semantic development, but it could also be that he just fell asleep during the slow development.
Yes.
So not
Yes. So it could be a causal relation, a causal end, or it could be a temporal one and then, or it could be additive and in addition to. Yeah? But this is something you need to work out. Okay? So, and did you notice that we are talking now about the propositional meaning of this reply? So who is doing what, when, where, why, and so forth, right? And what we've just found out is that in order to understand, to grasp the full propositional meaning of an utterance, we need to make inferences. We need to make inferences. And that is what Sperber and Wilson call explicatures, or in terms of a process, the explicating process. And explicatures are contextual assumptions that flesh out the semantic representation of an utterance. Okay. And the semantic representation of an utterance can be seen as something like a propositional skeleton which needs to be fleshed out. The skeleton is sort of indicated by the linguistic means of expression that are used, but that's just the skeleton. And there's an awful lot you need to flesh out with the help of contextual effects. And that is what they call explicatures. They flesh out the propositional meaning of an utterance. And here are three prominent processes involved: reference assignment, which thematic development, which neighbor, disambiguation, neighbor in the bench next door, enrichment, and because of that. Okay? And once you have fleshed out the propositional meaning of a sentence, of an utterance, you are able to continue, and you are able to create more inferential effects. And this is where implicatures come in. Contextual assumptions that can be derived from the fully fleshed out proposition. And they distinguish between strong and weak implicatures. Strong implicatures are implicatures on which we all would agree. Okay, so what is the strong or the strongest implicature here of this reply?
The neighbor fell asleep.
No. That's explicit. Well, that's part of the propositional meaning.
I didn't like the lecture.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so the question was, did you like the Shakespeare lecture? And on the surface of things, B doesn't seem to reply to this question. Yeah? Doesn't even seem to talk about a lecture or a Shakespeare lecture, but talks about the thematic development being slow and my neighbor falling asleep. What does this have to do with the Shakespeare lecture? Okay? So this is something you need to work out in terms of explicatures. And on the basis of all this, you understand, as a hearer, what this person wants to convey. Namely, no, I didn't like it. Okay? And that is the strongest implicature. Can you think of weaker implicatures?
My neighbor didn't like it either.
Mm-hmm. Yes? What else? I mean, in a way, it's open and kind of open-ended.
Maybe the lecture was not good.
Yes, yes. So it's an implied criticism, yeah. And this is actually a very interesting area also from a literary perspective. When you think of poems and when you think of metaphors, they usually carry a whole bouquet of weak implicatures. And these weak implicatures are not necessarily the same for different readers. Maybe certain stronger implicatures are, but then there are these fringe implicatures that are different for different readers, and which are different for readers from different historical times. Yeah. So if you take Shakespeare's sonnets and how they were read by his contemporaries and how they were read throughout the centuries. And it's interesting to analyze this with the help of translations, for instance. Yeah? So when you translate a text, then you need to try to somehow come up with a target text that has a similar range of strong and weak implicatures, which is usually not really possible. You always add something and you lose something. Yeah. But that's an interesting area for literary analysis. Okay. So this is relevance theory, and again you will hear more about this in pragmatics. I mean, all these things, starting from presupposition. And I hope you'll enjoy it. Next week we move on beyond single utterances or short sequences of utterances to texts and discourse, and we will carry this on to that level and try to figure out what makes a text a text. See you next week then.